Good morning, everyone. This is my newest Frankenpen, and I've been making Frankenpens now for maybe 20 or 30 years even, and my Frankenpens are made of three pens. The nib, which is a Victorian-era gold dip pen nib from around 1880 or so, is fitted into a cap and barrel of a more modern fountain pen from maybe the 20s or 30s or 40s, whatever fits. And the third pen is often the most important, it's required, is a feed. And it's usually not the feed that went into the original pen, because if it were the original feed, it would deform this nib too much and it wouldn't work. These nibs are flatter in cross-section, and consequently they don't fit. So I usually have to put a smaller diameter feed in this pen to fit the Frankenpen nib on. Well, what that means is often the ink flow isn't as good as it could be, but it doesn't make any difference for me because I use these dip pen Frankenpen nibs 99.9% of the time for my calligraphic work, and I always dip the pen in ink each time I need to. And I found that when I tried to fill them with a sack and put a sack in it and try to fill the pen, that the ink flow was never able to keep up with me. So consequently, it was never a pen that I could carry around with me. It was always a pen I'd have on my desk. Well, a couple of days ago, I put this nib, this dip pen nib, into this fountain pen, a Swan, maybe Todd Company pen, and discovered, to my delight, that the pen has been flowing perfectly fine. Now, I'm not doing my usual calligraphic stuff with this one, but even here, you see there it's railroading a bit, which, I don't want to have happen when I'm in the middle of a calligraphic project. So it may not work for that, but it does work for drawings. So I'm going to try to determine how I was successful in this particular case to make this one work. And it may just be a complete fluke, in which case I'm very lucky, or it might be something I can replicate with other of my Frankenpenning experiments, I guess we can call them, because we never know they're going to be successful. It's not my Frankenpen production so much as my Frankenpen experimentation. So this pen nib, and I've talked about this nib for many, many times, videos already, is one that was quite damaged when I got it. It had, as the seller said, issues, which it did have. The issues specifically were very little iridium left in a bent nib. Well, I fixed the bent nib part so that it works. As you can see, the very little iridium I was unable to do much about, but I'm able to make the pen so it actually works, and it works perfectly fine. Now, this nib is not particularly any different from any other fountain pen nib that I have. Normally, what I like about the Victorian-era dip pen nibs is that they snap back to zero from a thick stroke to a thin stroke, and it is very distinct and quick. Sometimes fountain pens, when you go back to zero, going from 0 to 60 is easy, but 60 to 0, it's a little sluggish. And the nib snaps back, but sometimes there's ink residue on the very tip of the nib because of the way the nib is shaped. that it doesn't snap back to zero as quickly as it could. But this one is pretty good. Anyway, I'm very happy with this nib, and I'm going to try my Frankenpenning using other Swan pens, and maybe I'll find that they flow as well. I probably still wouldn't take these other pens out away from the desk because I don't do calligraphy on the train or walking around town or whatever. I do my calligraphy at home, but I do sketching outside in the real world, and to have a pen that has ink in it where I don't have to lug around a ink bottle is what makes the fountain pen so magnificent in the first place. So that being said, I don't know what this video is about. This video is about sharing my delight, I guess that's what it's about, in making a dip pen Frankenpen nib function. And again, I don't know exactly why it's working, but it is. So I'll try it with other ones. So now that we've rambled for 6 minutes and 39 seconds about this, let's see if I can actually do a drawing with it. Oh, what will I draw today? I've been drawing knights in armor and faces and things like that, but I'll see if I can actually draw a real thing that's in front of me here. What is worth drawing? I still haven't done my handcuff drawing yet, so let's try drawing my handcuffs here. Now you may be wondering why I have a pair of handcuffs, and you'd be surprised at the stuff I have. I have in my house at the moment, I've got a gynecology table. I have 2 embalming tables. I have many thousands of fountain pens. I have maybe 100 pairs of binoculars. I just have a collection of stuff. I'm a hoarder. No, I'm not a hoarder. A hoarder is a different kettle of fish. I'm a kettle calling a pot black here. I'm a different kind of an amasser of things. There's a little bit of connoisseurship going on in my acquisitions of things, and those, I think hoarders don't have a connoisseurship aspect. They may have this need to have every Time magazine from 1952 to the present in their possession, but they don't necessarily feel they need it for research of the news of the week and compare it with what happened some years earlier. They're not a library in that sense. They just somehow have this desire to I'm not seeing my drawing here. Well, now I've moved my still life. So I don't think I'm a hoarder in that way, but I am an amasser. I do have lots of collections of things, and I do have a collector gene, though it's not exactly the same as other collectors. I delight in seeing the variety of if it were fountain pens, for example, the variety of the output. And in binoculars, it's sort of the clever way that prisms were used, and how each binocular is a slightly different design. And that's true of anything that's manufactured that people collect. Anyway, why do I have these? I only have one pair of handcuffs. That isn't true. I have a handcuff key ring, which is a little tiny version of these without a key, just little clippy things on them, but this is the only real pair of handcuffs I have. And I have a friend who wants me to do some large drawings of handcuffs for him. He's hiring me to do them. And so I've been drawing them, doing sketches like these to try to come up with a way to compose the larger pieces that I'll be making. I'm very happy with this pen and how it's writing. It's just very surprisingly functional. As a Frankenpen, it's also surprisingly functional as a nib that was so damaged. Often when a nib is damaged and you try to bend it back to its normal state, it's never quite get it right. And I'm sure I didn't get it quite right, but I got it to a point where I am able to use it. And it works fine for the purposes I'm using it for which I'm using it. I did a monogram of a B and an S using these handcuffs as a model, and you can sort of see how a B can be made using a pair. Maybe you can't, but the S was nice. I'm running out of ink. Maybe not, maybe. Sometimes when you touch the paper, the oils of your hand create a little resist for the ink, and the ink won't flow. So that might have been what was happening right here. So what I'm doing by looking at these handcuffs is I'm looking at the, as you can see, there's a lot of light right here, and this is sort of dark, and I'm trying to come up with different compositions, because this guy that's hiring me to do this wants maybe 4 or 5 drawings, so I'm going to try to make them all be, they're all going to be different, obviously, from each other, but they're going to be, I want them to, be a nice little ensemble, little suite of different drawings. So one of the things I like is this little bit of white highlight that you see here on the edges, and you don't see that in the drawing because the background isn't filled in. So if I add the background shading, those white areas should pop more. the background, you can hear the groaning of the freight trains that are going past my window. Anyway, the real drawings I'm going to do for this guy will be with white pencil on black paper. So rather than drawing the shadows, which is what most of us draw, we draw the dark rather than the light. I'll be drawing the light when I work backwards. It's a trick that takes some doing to learn how to do. It's not your brain needs to be rewired when you work backwards like that. I can see how this one is off. It's kind of a nice composition. I don't know why I suddenly was thinking of cat legs, looking at the way these things are situated. Reminded me of how cats sort of have all their forelegs arranged just so when they're sleeping. See, now it's running out of ink, so let's fill it up. The ink I'm using is purple ink that is probably older than I am. A local, now deceased pen collector friend of mine had lots of quart bottles of ink, which I discovered by accident at his house. I was in his kitchen looking at pens he was selling me, and I stood up and stretched my legs, and I went over to the cupboard and opened the cupboard to get a glass of water, and he has a very shrill voice. Wah! He shrieked in such a tone as if to suggest that if I was opening this thing up, I would let out all of the evils of the world, or who knows what. I don't know why he shrieked so, but he did. And as I opened the cupboard, I saw, looking down at me, or they weren't looking, I was looking up at them, I saw above me quart bottles of Parker and Schaefer ink, and I was shocked and surprised by that, as anyone would be, thinking that, and Frank, the guy whose house I was at, pointed at the display, not a display, a little grouping of paper cups that he would use to actually drink water from, and that was what he had on the counter. His kitchen cabinets, all of his cabinetry in his kitchen were filled with quart bottles of 50-year-old ink, which was a surprise. But I loved that idea. I loved it, and I took 2 empty quart bottles of Waterman ink, put them in my kitchen, but filled them with, they were empty bottles of ink. I filled them with oil and vinegar, so they were my salad dressing bottles. But anyway, what was I saying here? What about ink? Oh, so this ink is old. I ramble. That's what happens when you watch me. You have to just deal with my rambling. So this ink is old, and some of the ink I got from him, and that I got from him in later years, and I got from his estate after he died. Some of the ink is bad. The whatever makes ink separated and suspended and faded, and if it was a dye, it faded. If it was a mixture of stuff, it ended up just sort of settling, and the liquid part was watered down gray, but the purple and the green remained really bright, quite bright. The blue faded, the black faded. Some of the red was good, but the purple and the green, whatever they used in making that, worked out really well. So this is a nice composition too, as you can see. It's, this is light, this is dark. There's just really a lot of nice play between the elements. So I'll try to remember this one when I do the real drawing. Real drawings. Shadows here. So here I just wanted to share with you the delight of this pen, Frankenpen, working, the first in many, many years. Now the other ones I have, I can't say that I have not had luck like this before, because I know I have, but this is the first one. The first nib I got that I decided could not be used for calligraphy and could only be used for drawing, by me anyway. And because of that, I was creating art, we'll call it, doing things with it, creating pieces with it that involved a lot of shorter strokes. And it's the short strokes that this is perfectly fine for. Really long strokes, it might railroad and skip. So again, it won't be good for calligraphy. But I'm very happy with rescuing this nib that had issues, still has issues, but the issues do not keep me from using it. So there we go. Here are my handcuff